consider supporting this podcast on Patreon. On this episode of the What is Asia podcast, I interview Mulong Xu, a Ph.D. student at the Arizona State University, to talk about Buddhist humanitarian efforts in Myanmar. Mulong, thanks for coming on this episode of the What is Asia podcast.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here.
So just starting out with the basics, can you, start by describing to people what is Myanmar, where is Myanmar, because that's the geographical location where your topic takes place. And can you describe to people what Theravada Buddhism is? It's something that most people in my audience have probably not heard of or aren't very familiar with. And use both of those questions to kind of contextualize what you're arguing in your research.
Sure. I'll try. So Myanmar is one of the Southeast Asian countries. More specifically, it's one of the mainland Southeast Asian countries right between China, Thailand, and India. And it's based on so over 80%, I believe, over 80% of Myanmar populations are Buddhist, and more specifically is Theravada Buddhist. What does that mean? Okay, so Theravada Buddhism is, in contemporary Buddhist world, Theravada Buddhism is one of the three main branches. So that includes Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. So Theravada Buddhism, how does it differ from, say, Mahayana Buddhism? So usually people would say what characterizes Mahayana Buddhism is the idea of Bodhisattva, which is the kind of enlightened beings that delayed his or her own enlightenment in order to save sentient beings, to save others. And what characterizes Theravada Buddhism is the idea of Arhat or Arahant, which is a kind of enlightened human beings that pursue their own enlightenment. So this is the common perceptions about the differences between these two major branches. But over the years, we came to understand that this might not be a correct way to understand their differences. But not to get into those details, I'll just say what characterizes Theravada Buddhism is more about the relationship between monks and layperson. It revolves around the reciprocal relationship between them. So the monks focus on teachings and teaching the Buddha's maintaining and teaching the Buddha's Dharma, which is the teaching. And the layperson focus more on providing support for the monks. This is actually more important aspect and more unique aspect of Theravada Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. And can you just talk a little bit about, okay, with that in mind, what are you talking about in your research?
Okay, so my research is, my dissertation research focused on Free Funeral Service Society in Myanmar. And Free Funeral Service Societies are charitable organizations that emerged in Myanmar in the late 1990s, initially in response to rising funerary costs. And since then, since over 20 years ago, these organizations have grown into a nationwide grassroots network to provide for social welfare needs that the Myanmar government has failed to address. So today you can find these organizations, free funeral service organizations, in pretty much every city across the country, and in some overseas Burmese community as well, like in Thailand and Malaysia. And these organizations provide not only free funeral service, or more specifically, free funeral transportation, but also various forms of social welfare services, including EMT and disaster relief. And some more resourceful organizations, like the most famous Free Funeral Service Society, the Yangon Free Funeral Service Society. They are able to provide other forms of services like free clinical care, vocational training, and after-school tutoring classes. They even have a library. So they provide these services for free of charge, and for the general public, regardless of ethnic and religious and class differences. So from my research, from my current dissertation research, I focus on two main aspects of these organizations. And first, I look at how this social welfare movement gives rise to a sense of moral obligation toward others, and how they contribute to a new association life that transcends social divisions. And the second aspect of my research focus on how these organizations bring Buddhism into everyday social life, and how they transform charitable social services and humanitarian work into a modern Buddhist vocation. So this is my main focus of the main focus of my research.
And you talk about how the free funeral services and the other humanitarian services provided by these Buddhists in Myanmar have caught the attention of celebrities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. It started, okay, so Jodu, he's the person that that kind of characterized the development of this social welfare movement, and how that becomes how to say, how that shaped the way in which Myanmar celebrities are involved in charitable social work. So Jodu, that's his name. Jodu is a two-time Myanmar Motion Academy Award winner. He was the best actor and best director at some point. And the story, he has a very, very interesting life-changing story. It started off by he bringing his kids to a monastery. So his kids asked the monk, the head monk, so where would actors go after they die? So the monk was pretty straightforward, telling the kids that the actors go straight into hell after they die. So, and why? And the monk explained, because actors give people unnecessary emotion, so that they create attachment, and they so they lead to bad conditions of rebirth, and in this case, hell. And Jodu said he was truly scared at that point, at that very moment. And that's the moment when he started deciding that he will dedicate his second career to charitable social work, and that he wanted to transform his karma by dedicating his life to helping others. And that was the beginning of everything. So he started looking for ways to contribute to social welfare, to help others, and that was why he eventually became involved in free funeral services. And he even, like, in his public lectures, he will call himself not just an actress. He will call himself a Mata Minda, which means, well, Mata means funeral, and Minda means star. So he literally called himself a funeral star. And in the beginning, it didn't go well, even though he was a famous movie star, an actor. People didn't really like what he did at the time. It has to do with how funeral service was considered to be a defiling activity, like over 20 years ago. And but after he started doing it, people start seeing how beneficial it is to the public. And I think amazingly, we can see how public perception toward funeral service start changing over time. Like in today's Myanmar, it is actually one of the most highly regarded Buddhist practice.
So for the next couple of questions, I'm going to pull some quotes from the materials that you sent me. At one point you write, and I quote, "This Buddhist humanitarian project stands in direct opposition against current Buddhist nationalist movements and their anti-Muslim agenda." What do you mean by that?
Let's say the current study of Myanmar usually focus on Buddhist nationalism, and that Buddhist nationalist movement that include the 969 movement and subsequently the Mabada movement. What they advocate is they want to encourage the Buddhist public to work together to protect the Buddhism and the nation and the culture from the Muslim communities. And what they perceive is it's a threat to Buddhism and most importantly to the Buddha's teaching. That has been a defining, how to say, it has been, the effect has been devastating. It caused several communal conflicts over the last 10 years. And what I see in this Buddhist social welfare movement in Free Funeral Service Society, it's a different way to, it's a different sense of belonging and solidarity. And it has to do with the way in which they see themselves in this country, in the larger moral communities. What I mean by that is Free Funeral Service Society since the very beginning advocates a more socially inclusive way to provide their service. They usually say their services are provided to the public without discriminations of ethnicity, religion, and the class. They call that Lu Miao Ma Yue, Lumyo Badama Yue and Xingye Changdama Yue, and which means Lumyo means race, Bada means religion, and Yue means to select, to differentiate, to distinguish, and Ma is negation. So Lumyo Badama Yue means not to discriminate on the basis of religions and race. And Xingye Changdama Yue means not to discriminate on the basis of, not to make a difference between the poor and the rich. So this kind of vision leads to, I would say, it absolutely transformed people's sense of belonging, solidarity, and the moral obligation towards social others. There is a context to it, actually. Like in the past, the kind of mutual aid, the social services that people had for each other usually exists only within small and the local community that share the same ethnicities and religious background. And these services are usually membership based, which means people very much don't need to care for others outside their immediate social circle. But things are very different now. So while caring for others has become a good deed, we can see a new understanding of ethical actions has emerged, and it pushed people to see themselves as a member of a larger moral communities, and push people to care for others, for strangers. And as it has had a profound effect on collective response to suffering, and especially to like interfaith collaborations in humanitarian missions. Like we can see in the Cyclone Nargis in 2008 that took over 140,000 lives, and the annual floods during the rainy seasons, and the earthquake and fire. You can see how how individuals and organizations with different religious background come together in the aftermath of these disasters and try to work together instead of excluding each other from their own community, from their social circles. So what I mean, so returning to your question, what I mean by this social welfare movement provide a different way to a more socially inclusive vision against Buddhist nationalism, is that they are advocating a more socially inclusive way to understand associational life, to understand public life, to understand individuals' moral obligation and social obligation to social others.
Mm-hmm. And another quote that I pulled from your materials, if you can briefly summarize this, you're right, my project tends to the differences between two popular types of lay Buddhist activism, one being 969 and the other being Mavata. Can you go into a little bit more detail of what exactly is the difference between these two movements?
You mean 969 and Mavata?
Yeah.
Oh, technically there are not two different Buddhist nationalist movements. So 969 was a predecessor of Mavata, and Mavata, so in other words, is the formalizations of the 969 network. Okay, so I feel like I need to explain what they are. So 969 movement was a Buddhist nationalist movement, or more specifically, it's a boycott against Muslim economic establishment. So why 969? In South Asian tradition, South Asian Muslim tradition, there is they use a number. So in the South Muslim tradition, they use a three-digit number, 786, to symbolize to signify a sentence which is in the name of Allah, the ever merciful, the ever compassionate. So this three-digit represent that sentence. So so we can see this three-digit number being applied to Muslim halal restaurants. So as a way to tell people that this restaurant is halal, so you can come if you're a Muslim. So over the years, Burmese Buddhists see more and more restaurants emerging with this number. They perceive that as a threat to Buddhism, to the survival of Buddhism. So they actually invented a number, another three-digit number, 969, which represent the qualities of the three jewels of Buddhism, which are the Buddha, the Sangha, the monastic community, and the Dharma. So 969 means the normal qualities of these three jewels. So they created that number and a symbol as a cosmological defense against the Islamic expansion in Burma. So that's the 969 movement. It was mostly an economic boycott against Islamic expansion. And Mabada is actually a more formal organization established by some monastic leaders of the 969 movement. The most famous one is Wiradu, Ashim Wiradu is a leading Buddhist nationalist monk. So technically, they're not two separate movements. So Mabada is more like a formalization of the 969 network. But Mabada was more involved in political advocacy, so trying to advocate the legislation against Islamic expansion. So more specifically, and it advocates like legislation against interfaith marriage, so stuff like that.
One of the questions that kept emerging in my mind as I was reading over your research is the thought of, Buddhism is often not considered to be a proselytizing religion. And for those who don't know proselytizing, the idea that you're trying to actively go out and recruit people and immerse them in your religion. Buddhism is often not considered to be a proselytizing religion. However, given these humanitarian aid projects and given this concern over Muslim expansion in Myanmar, would it be fair to say that proselytization in Myanmar among Buddhist communities is something that is frequently occurring?
Yes. First of all, I would say we might be able to say that this is a misconception of Buddhism. And in Burmese Buddhism, specifically, there has been systematic effort involved in Buddhist missionary activities, at least since the beginning of the 20th century. And I would say that partly has to do with colonization. which was considered to be a major threat to the survival of Buddhism in Myanmar, and also partly has to do with multi-ethnic and multi-religious context. So colonization was considered to be, especially its effort to secularize politics, to get Buddhism out of politics, out of public life, was considered a major threat to Buddhism because it robbed monks of its role as the teacher of the public, teacher of the people. So so especially after the independence, there has been systematic effort to proselytize Buddhism, to proselytize the way
proselytize, yeah,
proselytize Buddhism among ethnic minorities, to convert non-Buddhist ethnic minorities into Buddhism. But in terms of the social welfare movement, I wouldn't say this has something to do with proselytization. So I hope that can answer your question, because this social welfare movement actually the overall goal is to provide their service to the general public. So it has less to do, or less or nothing to do, with proselytization.
Mm-hmm. And the last question before we go, if someone's listening to this and they want to know more about Buddhism in Myanmar, or in Southeast Asia in general, what would be one or two books that you would recommend?
Two books I would recommend are, one of it is Theravada Buddhist Encounter with Modernity, edited by my advisor, Dr. Juliana Schober, and the late Professor Stephen Collins. It's a collection of interdisciplinary, of cross-disciplinary research that discuss modern forms of Buddhist practice that have emerged in not just South and Southeast Asia, but also more broadly from places like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Burma, Cambodia, and Southwest China. So it's one of the best books that is available now, that covers like more contemporary understanding, more contemporary case studies of Theravada Buddhism. And the other book is Theravada Tradition, Buddhist ritual cultures in contemporary Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka, by John Holt. It offers a really interesting comparative approach to understanding the development of Buddhism in contemporary Southeast Asia.
Well, thanks for coming on this episode of the What is Asia podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And for those who want to see more content, you can go to the What is Asia podcast YouTube channel or nakodadefonso.com. We'll see you in the next episode.